The first stage of making my final magazine front page was to consider a suitable name as well as style for the indie genre I have chosen. By doing this, I looked into conventions used by Kerrang, Billboard, NME, Uncut, Indie and others. I liked the masthead idea conveyed by Kerrang, which showed a shattered look which reflected the rock music as it is reckless and slightly dangerous. I also liked the colourful imagery conveyed by Billboard, but yet again the colours reflected a different genre to mine, which was light-hearted music such as pop music. After a short while I was able to conduct a few names, those being Captivate, Damn, Defiant, Insight and Ruthless. Out of these names I made a tally chart for the target audience to decide on which name that they preferred. The tally chart showed that Captivate was the most popular. After this I had to decide on the font. The fonts were between three different fonts, these being Abandon, California and Don't. I asked my target audience on which they preferred, and this led me to choose a font that reflects the type of music conveyed, which is slightly different as it is eroded, being Abandon, and there is one letter in serif font giving it an independent look to the magazine. On a masthead, I then had to face the task of deciding on how style, colour as well as font to remain through the magazine. For this I used conventions from other magazines such as Kerrang, NME and Vibe. I had to make sure that a colour scheme was present throughout my magazine. I decided to go for black, white, grey and purple. I chose the black, white and grey as they are typical colours that you would normally see featured on a magazine. You can see through Kerrang, NME and Vibe that they have used this colour theme also. I then chose a light purple. I wanted the light purple, not only does it give the magazine a unique look, but it also gives an extract from the artist's hair as well as a description of her personality. Also, to remain within the house style, I used different variations of font. For the masthead, content, title and page numbers on the double page spread, I used the eroded font of Abandon. For the cover lines, content text and double page spread text, I used a simplistic sans serif font of Vanadine. I then used the final font called Love and Trust in order to give a unique appeal to the artist's name. For the main image on my front page, I had to use a respectable person. Prior to taking pictures, I used my research of other magazines such as Kerrang, NME, Billboard and others to look at the type of person, pose and shot that was used. Mainly I found that a medium shot was used with visual eye contact to reach out to the readers. This inspired my different photos taken prior to choosing the final one. I've created a short list of all the pictures that I've taken and then shown which ones I've used to make more suitable for the magazine. I had to choose specific clothing to match the look of the person as well as match the needs of the target audience. The crop top gives her a bit of cheekiness as well as individuality as she poses with a guilty look on her face. I've also edited her to have blue hair as my target audience seemed to appear to like experimenting with hair, piercings and tattoos. For the final features on the front page, I had to use a mixture of conventions used from different magazines. I used different language devices such as I included rhetorical questions of do you want a chance to win VIP tickets, which made it quite personal to the reader. I also used alliteration of Inside Indie referring directly to the genre as well as a link to which would be explained in the contents. Also, from looking at other magazines, I found examples of where they included free samples or free giveaways. This was included as I included free posters as an extra bonus to my magazine. I've also included a BBM scanner to make it more personal for the readers. They can scan this to get a free music download courtesy of Captivate. When creating the contents page, I first of all had to consider the layout. From looking at differentiations of magazines, I decided to split my page into 3 equal columns. I made sure that the text was aligned properly in the proportion. by giving it a margin used in Photoshop. I also split the page up to make it more interesting, and by looking at Kerrang and other magazines, I added 3 pictures to make interest to my content page. I also included example pictures of 2 posters that are featured within the magazine. I featured a picture of my front page as well as a BBM code. I had to decide on how many images to use on the front page, and as I've stated, I'd used 3. I carried out some research on different magazines and how they presented their artists on the front page, contents page and double page spread. Due to being so many different unique layouts, I decided to go for 3, as I felt this would appear to be more aesthetically pleasing rather than having too many or too little. Out of these pictures from my secondary research, I included my headlining artists under a brief summary of the magazine issue. I also used another band which mentioned on the front page with a smaller individual photo of one of the band members. My next step was thinking of a design feature to add to my content page to make it appear more interesting, as well as by using other conventions from other magazines. From looking for examples such as Kerrang and Billboard, I used the idea of having colour background blocks to enhance the text of the subheadings. I used these to make certain aspects stand out as well as to make it look professional. Another convention which I slightly copied was from Kerrang. Kerrang used the blacked out circle at the top right hand corner of their page. I manipulated this and used a black rectangular box at the top of my page, as well as added my contents page heading as well as Captivate the title. I used this to emphasise the contents heading, but also to create a house style using the masthead of my magazine. As you can see, it is quite similar to Kerrang magazine, as I found this an effective way to add an eye-catching feature. I then added examples of the posters of which you can find inside at the top of my page to also make it have a nice appeal. Another subtle feature of the contents page was including the cover lines in the contents page in order to show all the contents of the full magazine. This was used by looking at other magazines such as Kerrang, Billboard, Vibe, NME as well as others, in which all of them show clear indication of the cover lines used again in the contents page. My final use of conventions were used throughout my double page spread. To start my double page spread, I looked into the layout of the page, this being the amount of columns used to consist and create the final double page spread. From looking into other double page spreads like Q's featuring Lady Gaga, Kerrang's featuring Serge and others, I realised that there are many different layouts that convey different artists. In the end, I decided to go for 6 columns, 3 with a lining of the picture and 3 including text either side to show boldness as well as the artist again being centre stage. Another convention that I have put into my magazine was looking at different ways in which the interview techniques were used on the double page spread. I looked into magazines such as Q, Kerrang, NME and found a few ideas of which I could implement into my own work. For Kerrang magazine, I decided I liked the feature of which they used question and answers whilst talking to the featured artist. This showed that a friendly atmosphere was conveyed. As the artist was being interviewed, the interviewee looked as if he was a friend to the artist. As you can see, I've implemented this into my work, as purple shows the questions as well as black shows the answers. Another feature widely used by different magazines was the use of an embedded quote. By looking into magazines, I had to either choose an inspirational or slightly bizarre comment in order to grab attention of the readers. I decided to go for an inspirational quote in which sympathises with the target audience. Again, I looked into using drops caps or watermarks as they have been used in other magazines such as Q and Kerrang. I decided against the watermark due to the position of my text. However, I have implemented drops cap. A final aspect was looking into the language used within the magazine. As the magazine was situated and aimed at the Indie target audience, I felt this had an average of a 12-year plus audience. Therefore, profanities had to be included in the text, but with a slight pleasing look towards them, as they have asterisks conveying the actual words. I used asterisks as some of the target audience may be underage and may not be able to listen to such language. I looked into other magazines such as Classic Rock and Kerrang, and I found that profanities here have been conveyed without the use of covering them up. Therefore, I have created an individual look to my magazine.